we train the natural movement of thought through 7 simple steps. These steps work like a color staircase. Seven simple steps, 7 colors. You can see it in a really good example is it shows up when you can tell cause one obvious sign is that's what I'm saying, so yeah, that kind of proves the point. You can see it in the way she talks, in his reaction, in the results. Do you think they're improving? Yeah, you can see it in the way they work now. How do you know she's nervous? You can see it in her face and her voice. A really good example is the last meeting, what happened yesterday, the client's response. Can you give me an example? Sure, a really good example is the way they solved it last week. What do you mean by progress? A really good example is how much faster they work now. It shows up when people get tired, when the pressure gets too high, when nobody communicates clearly. When does that kind of stress appear? It shows up when people try to do too much at once. When the team starts struggling, it shows up when nobody says what the problem really is. You can tell because they sound calmer, because the results are better, because people react faster. How do you know the team is doing better? You can tell because people aren't panicking anymore. How do you know she means it? You can tell because her tone is totally different. One obvious sign is better communication. One obvious sign is fewer mistakes. One obvious sign is how quickly they respond. What makes you think things are getting better? One obvious sign is that people ask better questions now. How do you know the training worked? One obvious sign is the way they deal with problems now. That's why I'm saying we need to slow down. This matters. The issue is deeper. Why do you think we need a different plan? Because the old one keeps failing. That's why we should change it. Why are you pushing this point so much? Because the signs are already there. That's why this matters. So yeah, that kind of proves the point. That kind of shows what I mean. That kind of confirms it. Do you think that example supports your idea? Definitely. So yeah, that kind of proves the point. Was that enough evidence for you? Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that kind of proves the point. You can see it in the way people react under pressure. A good example is the last project we worked on. It shows up when communication starts breaking down. You can tell because people become slower. One obvious sign is the number of mistakes going up. That's why the issue starts earlier. So yeah, that kind of proves the point. You can see it in the way people react when the pressure goes up. A good example is what happened during the last project. It shows up when communication starts breaking down. You can tell because people get less clear. One obvious sign is the number of mistakes. That's why the issue starts earlier. So yeah, that's kind of proved the point. Do you think she's stressed? Yeah, you can see it in the way she talks. How do you know they've improved? You can see it in the results. Can you give me an example? Sure, a really good example is the last meeting. What do you mean by bad planning? A really good example is what happened yesterday. When does this problem start? It shows up when people get tired. When does stress become obvious? It shows up when pressure gets too high. How do you know she feels better? You can tell because she sounds calmer. How do you know the team is doing better? You can tell because people aren't panicking. What shows the change most clearly? One obvious sign is better communication. How do you know the training worked? One obvious sign is fewer mistakes. Why do you think we need to slow down? We keep missing details. That's why I'm saying we need to slow down. Why are you focusing on this so much? The signs are already there. That's why I'm saying this matters. Does that example support your idea? Yeah, so yeah, that kind of proves the point. Was there enough evidence for you? For sure, so yeah, that kind of proves the point.